On the night of February 24th, Russia attacked Ukraine from 10 different directions. The aim was to capture the capital, Kyiv, a metropolis with a population of over 3 million, and assign a puppet government. However, in the end, the battle for Kyiv became Russia's biggest defeat. In his visit to Moscow in 2021, the head of the CIA had to deal with extremely arrogant opponents. The US ambassador attending that meeting stated that Putin's officials were openly saying, "We're strong, we can attack Ukraine, and you won't stop us." However, neither American or European nor Ukrainian politicians believed a full-scale offense of one civilized country onto another is possible in the 21st century. Yet Ukrainian militaries believed, so they decided to play safe. And as it turned out, it was the right decision.
All the city officials, heads of districts and law enforcement agencies were gathered, and the plan of defense of Kyiv was approved. That is, we all already knew who, how and where will defend our country if this invasion begins.
On the eve of the invasion, Ukrainians started to withdraw equipment and soldiers from their bases. When more than 150 Russian missiles hit Ukrainian headquarters, warehouses and bases in the middle of the night on February 24th, most of the military equipment and people were already out of place. Simultaneously, with the missile attack, the sky was attacked by approximately 75 Russian warplanes. This is the same number as Ukraine had on the eve of the attack. However, Ukrainian aircraft and air defense systems that were removed from the bases of deployment resisted and did not allow Russians to control the airspace, to their big surprise. At the same time, enormous columns of armored machinery marched on Kyiv from different directions. Through surveillance cameras, Ukrainians saw hundreds of tanks crossing the border from all sides. It seemed impossible to stop the Russian invasion. The New York Times quoted an order to a Russian soldier to follow the vehicles ahead of him and reach Kyiv in 18 hours. The Russians set aside several days for the complete capture of the Ukrainian government. One of the definable encounters in the Battle of Kyiv happened on a small suburban airfield, Hostomel. Numerous videos filmed by regular Ukrainians show that hours after the invasion began, the airfield was attacked by at least 40 helicopters flying at a low altitude above peaceful cottages. The idea was to capture the runway and use it for landing large planes with troops and equipment. Deploying such forces 10 kilometers away from the capital would have made holding the city impossible. The plan seemed flawless. The area around the airdrome was protected by an understaffed National Guard brigade armed only with mortars and small arms. However, under the helicopters' fire, they battled elite Russian paratroopers. Once retreating, they also damaged the runway to obstruct the landing of transport aircraft. The next day, the troops of the armed forces of Ukraine approached the captured airfield. During fierce clashes, the runway was passed from hand to hand. The Telegraph called this defeat a Russia's humiliating retreat.
You know, the this was a symbolic place that the Russian aggression was started here. They're trying to deploy here the parachute troopers here and starting the occupation of the capital of our country. And our army kicks them out. That's it.
However, the danger was still not over. The satellite shots showed a 65 kilometers long column of armored vehicles moving toward Kyiv. However, the plan to quickly reach the capital has also failed. Heavy machinery has damaged the roads and got stuck in the mud. Instead of reaching Kyiv in 18 hours, Russians got stuck in northern Ukraine for days, and later for weeks. The New York Times warned, the battle for Kyiv will be a long and ferocious confrontation. Another key point in this confrontation was the small village of Moshchun, 19 miles from the Ukrainian capital.
I was not sure that we would be able to hold the positions. We were at the battalion's command and observation post for almost 24 hours, and all the reserved forces we had at that time were deployed.
However, due to its position, Mashchun could become a kind of gateway to Kyiv for the Russians, so they sent large forces here. The village changed hands several times, so the fate of Kyiv and in fact the entire war depended on just a few dozen Ukrainian soldiers, whether they could close the road to the capital. In the end, 85% of the village, with beautiful suburban cottages, was destroyed in combat. However, it withstood. Russians were stuck there for almost a month, and then were forced to retreat. However, another mistake emerged at this point. Russians didn't prepare enough water, food, and fuel. Damaged roads and Ukrainian resistance slowed the enemy's advance to a point when they ran out of supplies. Eventually, the Russian army started to break into stores and houses of peaceful citizens as they advanced. Subsequently, hundreds of dead Ukrainian civilians with traces of torture, thousands of destroyed houses, and other evidence of war crimes were found in the territories temporarily occupied by Russia. Ultimately, the matter of surviving has become their main concern.
So I think they thought they only had 3 days as well, so they brought 3 days worth of gas, 3 days worth of food. So once the third day, they could not go further because they were facing resistance from that.
The north of Ukraine is a wooded area. Russians moved through it, sometimes using 40-year-old maps for navigation, which Ukrainians later found on enemy's positions. Meanwhile, Ukrainian fighters knew their native places exceptionally well. The innovative tactic was based on the following. Ukrainian soldiers moved quickly on ATVs, striking the first and the last armored vehicle in a column from behind the trees. Later on, the artillery or drones systematically destroyed the equipment that got stuck in between. Apart from that, Ukrainians have blasted numerous bridges and the Irpin River Dam outside of Kyiv. The water spill had significantly impeded Russian advance. Inhabitants of Dmitiv village, which was flooded after the dam collapse, later said, "It's better to have water in our houses than Russians." Ukrainian villagers have also informed their armed forces of the enemy's whereabouts. Meanwhile, Russians, desperate for their losses, called back home via regular mobile phones.
We've got 120 people sent back to the brigade, to the hospital with injuries. We have, look, 120 wounded and 350 killed. Oh no, leave, my dear. Our brigade is not combat ready anymore. If we are attacked now, we'll be destroyed. That's all. We've got no tanks left. Nothing. Ukrainians blew up everything with mortars.
Ukrainian specialists were quickly locating a concentration of phone signals in the middle of a forest, which allowed striking such places with artillery fire immediately. Bloggers among Russian militaries have also helped. The head of Ukrainian military intelligence was telling how they monitored TikTok and other social platforms. Once, a video published by the occupants allowed Ukrainians to identify their exact location and strike it with 3 ballistic missiles within 40 minutes. Meanwhile, international experts shared numerous videos of abandoned Russian machinery. At the end of March, the Pentagon concluded, despite Kyiv being Russia's key target, all the plans to capture it had failed. Worth noting that these were no Rambos heroically defending the north. At the very beginning, the 72nd Mechanized Brigade was the only brigade available for the capital's defense. However, all the military training facilities were ordered to create temporary battalions and engage in combat with artillery systems normally used for practice. The territorial defense units have also played their role. These were the civilian volunteers who took arms to defend their motherland.
Almost 2 weeks without sleep, but all missions were completed. We managed to undermine the situation, to impose our will on the enemy, so they went to the defensive.
Russians didn't manage to capture Kyiv either in 3 days or 30. On the 36th day of the invasion, they were forced to retreat from the whole north of Ukraine. The battle for Kyiv ended with the victory of the forces of good that protected their home.